Welcome to Let's Talk Transformation Podcast.
Welcome to Let's Talk Transformation Podcast.
Today's
episode
is
about
turning disruption
and
into
we're going to
advantage.
be talking about one of the most
underestimated
transformation levers in business, which is finance. And today's guest thinks that finance leaders who still think in spreadsheets and reconciliations are already behind, really evolve from a transaction focus, of a value-driven focus. Joining us today is someone who's done exactly that. So I'm delighted to welcome Jasmine and Ahmed, transformation executive, a transformation executive who's led $100 million plus budgets, delivered $120 million plus in annual benefits finance across global industries, and now leads finance technology and data capabilities. Jasmine, welcome to the show. Jasmine, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you, Susie. It was really good meeting you. It was really good meeting you. I'm looking forward to
likewise.
And
Jasmine, likewise.
Always
pioneering the importance of investing in finance functions to create value for organizations, to stay relevant.
Also believe
finance must also balance finance and IQ, also balance EQ and
start
rethinking ROI,
start rethinking
ROI, more influence-empowered economy.
So
in today's episode, we're going to be asking, what does finance look like when it drives decisions?
Not
why do digital transformations fail to deliver ROI? And what must leaders do differently right now to stay relevant? So Jasmine, let's dive straight in. You've moved finance teams from reconciliation to decision What's the hardest habit to kill in a team that spent years measuring the past?
Well, if you think about, leaders or finance talent, what do we get rewarded for? We get rewarded from a very young age in our early days. Is number jockey, understanding number jockey, understanding numbers, building financial models, building financial models. That is what we are rewarded. That is what we are rewarded for time and time again. That in itself becomes a liability for us. So I would say the biggest challenge I see time and again is when I see time again is when I speak to finance. You don't need to worry about proving to worry about how to build models, that you know how to build models. Anyone that you are very you know the numbers better than anyone else. You know the numbers better than anyone else. Your numbers. But let's actually walk away from that. But let's actually walk away about what's not in the numbers. Let's talk about what's not in the numbers. And that's where I look at. And that's where I look at. Pivoting from a profession where you are rewarded for being IQ based, more IQ based, more EQ based of a profession, more EQ based of a profession.
And how did they react to that? And how walking away from the numbers? Because that's quite a big ask, isn't it? Because that's quite a big ask.
It's very difficult, right? Like I think it's very difficult, right? Like I think I've seen in almost every organization when you walk into, when you walk in financial review and you have your financial review and you have your finance team, is it how common is it? You're not and you're from marketing or you're not and you're from marketing or you're from product development or you're in a non-finance or you're in a non-finance function. Your finance partner comes to you, takes out not only their spreadsheets, takes out not only their PowerPoint, but probably a deck that's about a half-inch thick. Flip through and tables after tables after tables that they genuinely struggle with. There's a bit of, well, what about? There's a bit of, well, what about? What about they ask this number and not having that number on that spreadsheet at that point in time? Sense of anxiety that I think they just struggle to cope with and let go of. It's okay. You don't have to know every single number. You don't have to know every single number. Memorize.
So it's more like a holistic view. So it's more like a holistic view. But if I come back to numbers, $120 million you've delivered benefits across major transformations. What's the single biggest thing organizations doing wrong? You see organizations building the business case, how they're building the business case.
I think in the business case upfront, there's a few things, right? So a lot of these business, right? So a lot of these transformations, they typically bring in what technology. And what I see over and over again is technology cases. What is the cost of my technology? Making sure that I have enough funding to configure the solution and go live with the solution. What I don't see enough of in the business case is, well, how is this going to actually change the way we operate? How is this going to actually change the way we create value? And from an investment standpoint, one of the biggest blind spots I see is, well, it's all good in theory that we're going to go live in 3 months or 12 months or 18 months, depending on the initiative. But it's not just a technical go live. It's not just a it's about making the right investments. It's about making the right investments in culture and ways of working and ways of working to elevate the people alongside the tech, and not having a pure and not having more of a business go live versus a technical
and
go
when you
live.
talk technical go live, I mean, it's all about adoption, isn't it? I mean, it's all about adoption, isn't it? And scaling behavioural change and culture, like you just where it sort of lags. Is where what does a living business case actually look like? What does a living business case actually look like? By that I mean, who owns it? How by that I mean, who owns it? And what happens when you see that the culture and you see that the culture is not being adopted, is not being adopted.
So and I'm sure you've seen in a business case, like when we take your finance, if you think about your finance, if you think about we have the culture of finance that actually drive cases that actually drive decisions, capital investment decisions, and there's authorization of authorization of driven. It's more funding driven, and then you take that assumption, one and a few things. You're driving it purely based on what's my funding requirement. If I also peel that onion a bit. We have a $5 million investment. We have a $5 million investment. We see the hard lines of to come in. You need the consultants to come in. You need the technology provider to come in. But how often do we see that business case? Actually, I need to invest. Actually, I need to invest this type of talent. This type of talent investment in my organization. Investment in my organization. Truly unlock the value here. How often do we see? Let's invest this much to redefine the culture that we need to make this culture that we need to make this real. So I think that yes. And so I think that and that's one thing that I see. And that's one thing that I see upfront missing. Other end that I see missing. Other end that I see typically because we are so much around funding and the source of the funding and the source gone live on April 1st when we have the steer co. You don't talk about it. But adoption happens after, right? And that requires effort. And that requires effort magically. Adoption doesn't
no, unfortunately not. And like I always say, training is not adoption. Training is not adoption.
That's right.
That's right. The biggest questions I come up against is often asked by finance, how do you measure? How do you measure adoption? How do you measure agility or employee engagement? How do you measure agility or employee engagement? Where does that fit into this living business case? Because it's notoriously because it's notoriously isn't it? Transformation, measure, isn't it? So what would the ROI framework? So what would the ROI framework? Because like you say, it does need to be. Because like you say, it does need to be. Funding, we're measuring figures. We're also measuring figures. We're also measuring more behavioural aspects. Sort of more behavioural aspects.
Right. And this is where it becomes a bit ironic with finance, because we're very numbers driven, and that's how we're organically naturally inclined. When I think about let's take finance for example. I truly believe in how do we create value. If I have a new technology, if I have a new technology in the way I am managing my customer billings, my customer receivables, that entire process, my revenue cycle, my revenue cycle that manages my revenue cycle, that manages my revenue. What is the true value of that? What is the true value of that? The true value. Of course, I've got my financial hard benefits. Value is when my business can start having value creation conversations with my clients. Because I've taken the noise out, and they can have much more richer conversations that focus around new revenue channels, how to uplift the scope of services, and not get distracted from the noise. Those conversations themselves a more is what I call a wishy-washy type. It's an intangible, right? But it's an intangible. But how do we incorporate that into our business case? That measuring our business case and start measuring the conversation of how I engage with my customers. Is that now changing? Is that now changing? And how do I actually make sure that changes? I'm going to expand or let's take your product development, or let's take your product development, actually enabling them to go to market to go with new features with quicker and faster, and getting that quicker and faster, and getting that voice of the customer into the mix, and incorporating that into the business case. I think is a missed opportunity. I think is a missed opportunity that we're not doing today in the that we're not doing today. As much as I would like,
and how often do you see that happening? Or is it one of those things where you always, or is it one of those things where you always have to?
I feel like you always have to add it. I feel like because you always have to add natural, because it is we like finance folks, because we like finance folks, we like binary business. So and this also means and this also means in order for us to incorporate that, we have to walk away from our spreadsheets. We have to walk away from our spreadsheets. We don't need to spend 10 hours a day. 10 hours a day, our spreadsheet at a laptop. Our spreadsheet at a laptop. Finance people do that. We get out of our offices, get out of our offices. We go walk the floors, and it may have nothing to do with. I'll take like Legends Global. We have our venues. Legends Global. We have our venues. Now, am I a venue expert? Now, am I a venue expert? But is there a huge value? But is there a huge value person in me as a finance venues, visiting our venues, and walking the venues, the intangibles in the air, intangibles in the air? Will I see that value materialize and monetize overnight? Over a period of time? But over a period of time, I will absolutely, because I will understand where those opportunities are organically.
So, I mean, which is almost a different profile from the ones that we would typically discuss today for finance. But I want to come back to the profile discussion. I want to come back to the profile discussion. If I look at new models, while we're on business case and discussing, business case and discussing, business case and finance, younger leaders are growing up with, platform monetization platform, and they're normal in inverted commas for them. What does that mean for the way finance thinks? Because they are new, and we're moving towards them, but there is also legacy.
Yes. And if I look at some of these platforms, right? What is the power of that platform? What is the power of that young folks or anyone who's engaging in these platforms, when they turn into a business model, they turn into a business model. They may be providing a specific service, but in addition to that, they're engaging with a community. A community, which in turn is a customer base, that shares certain commonality, and first party data. You can't put a number behind it. You can't put a number behind it. First party data is instrumental, probably one of the most powerful, and it's being able to capture that insight while respecting data privacy and every regulation out there, and being very respectful of individual privacy. But you are capturing first party data capture that as a science, being able to synthesize it, and then being able to monetize it. Is that that's an easier said than done? But it is easier said than done. But it is we have a opportunity that I think we in this very digital, AI world that we live in.
And particularly AI, which is generating value or cost exponential speed. What happens? It's being generated in ways that don't match traditional P&L, like you just said. What would you say the specific financial blind spots are to be looking for?
So when I think about AI, and I think about the blind spots, I think about the blind spots. To me, I look at AI as not a buzzword. I look at AI as an evolution. I look at it as an evolution and sophistication of the algorithm. Right? That's all it is. We can put whatever name in front of it. We can put whatever name in front of it. It's just an algorithm. What are algorithms good at? What are algorithms good at? When you algorithms are good at when you can behind it, business rules behind it. When you can define rules, when you can define rules behind it. What are they not good at? What are they not good at? They can amplify the impact, and that's where bias comes in, right? And those are the pros and cons of it. But then as we think about this, as we think about this, I think while there's a big force, while there's a big force and STEM-based, because that's the world of AI, we're missing out on is what is it that we can't get an algorithm to do? That's the creativity, and the EQ side, and the EQ side of it. So how do we over that element of it that's been left behind, incorporate that into our model? Incorporate that into our model.
And how do you see organizations leaders doing that? Organizations leaders doing that?
I think foremost, I'm sure I'm dating myself. I'm sure I'm dating myself. We live in a world, I grew up in a world where we're trained we organically to either be left side or right side of our brain, left side or right side of our brain, and right. And I think still, and to this day, I think it's still, and to this day, I think it's still inclined that way, right?
Unfortunately,
so I think what. So I'd like what I think actually in this AI world is grooming our talent from a very young age to be a balance between EQ and IQ. I need to understand the EQ side of the EQ side because of the house. Because my robots and my algorithms, my AIs just won't get it. They're gonna miss a beat on it. They're gonna miss a beat on it. And then on the flip side, my IQ side, I need to understand it if I'm going to live in an AI world. If I'm going to live in an AI world, build and maintain and understand my algorithms, right? Understand my algorithms. So I think it's pivotal. So I think it's how do we actually build both sides of that muscle, which I truly believe, which as a society, as much as we have, I think in some sectors, I think in some sectors, you can either be one or the other. You can either be one or the other. I actually think that's a misnomer. I think that broken can be completely broken, and we focus on having more folks who have muscles.
It's very binary, isn't it? It's left or right, but it's not, is it? It's always all right, but it's not, is it? It's always a mix of complex. Both and complex beings. But what does that mean, though, if I look at talent? What does that mean, though, if I look at talent? What does it mean? And what does it mean? The profile you're looking for when you're recruiting finance talent, when you're recruiting finance strategy table, that can sit at the strategy table in the same way that it's not left or right. In the same way that it's not left or right. Silos of organisations and work together more are now having across the organisation, which I think is brilliant. Across the organisation, which I think is for different skills, doesn't it? It calls for different skills.
Absolutely. So I'll give you the number of conversations I get into, the number of conversations I get into, and I'll ask, right, like some of your audience members, that when we go in and we interview talent, or when our folks go in and interview talent, what do we do? We take a job description. What do we do? We take a job description based on the what. That is actually based on the what. And we interview them for the technical skills. And then we go down the road after several rounds. Maybe at some point we interview them for their mindset. What if we flipped it? What if we said, listen, in this environment, we need is someone who has a growth mindset, someone who has a growth mindset, someone who is comfortable in ambiguity, someone with A, B, and C. What if we actually screened people for that mindset first?
Interesting.
And then say, look, and if I now do another finance talent, what if I actually say, listen, I'm going to actually screen my talent not based on the traditional domain expertise of accounting. I'm going to interview and assess my talent based on their storytelling capabilities, critical thinking capabilities. In my organization, I feel like is going to make it or break it. This is what actually is high make it or break it. Not someone can keep the shop floor open, high performing talent, but high performing talent. And what if we flipped it that way? So I'm a big advocate. I'm a big advocate of flipping the equation.
Yeah, me too. And I think it's a completely different set of leadership skills almost. And what does digital fluency therefore mean for a CFO of finance leaders in 2026?
So digital literacy or digital fluency means it does not mean that I know how SAP works. SAP
it doesn't
works.
mean I know how.
It doesn't mean I know how
one stream.
there's a portfolio.
There's a portfolio of
SAPs and your Oracles and your SAPs and your Oracles and your D365s.
Your black lines.
There's so many technologies.
There's so many technologies. It's not about
even ChatGPT.
It's not about how that.
It's not about how that
specific technology at a keystroke.
It's about
understanding
agnostic
of how technology,
data models
are designed and maintained,
and
being able to use your critical thinking then
your critical
to drive
thinking then
how they should be designed and maintained.
Agnostic
to the tool itself. I think
wedded marrying ourselves to the tool,
we're doing a big disservice.
We're doing a big disservice to ourselves.
Tools will come and go,
but the foundation and the fundamentals are not changing.
So I'm hearing that CFOs need to evolve their operating model. What do you think is the biggest evolution? What do you think is the biggest of operating model? Because it's quite easy to say traditional P&L to platform, but it's not quite as black and white as that. But it's not quite as black and white as that.
It's not black and white, and I think this is
it's
not just
black and white,
and I think this is not just beyond finance,
but also beyond
finance.
The way I see the world,
is
if I had a foresight,
today if you go into organizations,
the finance team versus the marketing team versus the marketing team, and depending on your discipline, to stay within your vertical.
I actually imagine a world where those verticals are gone.
And you bring in talent that are more horizontal.
So if I take that in mind,
if I think about
the future of
do I really need to hire
someone with an accounting major?
Someone with an
Do I
accounting
really
major?
need to hire someone with a finance major?
Maybe I bet on someone
Maybe I bet on someone
has a different discipline,
and then I bring them in,
and then I bring them in
because of their storytelling capability, or because of their critical thinking, or because of their
I bring them onto my team. I bring them onto my team, and then I
to understand finance,
to understand finance better,
upskill them,
and I understand accounting better,
to understand accounting better.
I would almost propose
that's one way of building the future of finance.
Wow. Okay. So recruiting for mindset and then teaching finance is essentially what I'm hearing. Finance is essentially what I'm hearing. Okay. Because I think it's really interesting in terms of breaking down silos, functional silos, and working across organizations and working across organizations, having enough clarity, having enough accountability for it not to paralyze So if I take that lens, what does recruiting for mindset first bring to that?
So one, let's talk with growth mindset, and having that drive, and drive cannot be taught.
Either you have drive or you don't.
Either you have drive or you don't.
But if I'm going to bring in someone who I know who is passionate and has drive,
they have a growth mindset.
They have a growth mindset.
Display intellectual curiosity.
I'm
basically bringing someone in who's going to learn. Want to learn,
right? Yeah.
And I would rather have someone.
And I would rather
join my team. Because I'm a long haul investor.
Because I'm a long haul investor, right? I'm not looking
shops
for
are open and the lights turned on.
But if I know that someone has that mindset, they will be more willing. They will be more willing
to learn and stretch their muscles and grow in ways that I could not have imagined.
So it gives me a talent that I can actually groom and invest for the future.
And then it's like, look,
And then it's like,
they may not be an accounting major,
they may not be an
traditional
accounting
or a traditional finance major,
or a traditional
but I will
finance
invest
major.
in them to
But I
give
will
them those
invest in them
capabilities
to
help
give
them
them
those
bring
capabilities
apart.
to
And then
help them bring
ultimately,
apart.
what do you have?
And then
You have a fluid talent.
You have
that
a fluid
tomorrow,
that
depending on the size of your organization,
they may not
finance
and
go and work for
product
development
and go and work for product development,
or may go
and that's
okay.
Because
that's okay
that you now have
someone
who's
in product development
who is
financially more savvy.
Absolutely.
And as an organization, you're uplifting the entire talent, and as an organization, you're making better business decisions, no matter where you decision, no matter where you.
I love that, and I love that model of skills-based organizations-based where organizations you can do that. But what does it mean what does it mean for development programs, leadership and employee development programs? Because we are still in our this is our CIO development program. This is our CIO development program. What's one capability? What's one capability every CFO in development program? And do you think it needs to be a CFO in inverted commas CFO in inverted commas?
I don't think it needs to be a CFO. I don't think it needs to be leadership, right? I think the leadership, right? I think the first thing we need to stop doing is promoting people on the what, right? I think the first thing we can start doing is promoting people on their how. Promoting the smartest person, maybe technically the smartest, may not always be. A leader does not need to know all the answers. A leader does not need to be the smartest person in the room. A leader needs to know how to galvanize talent. They need to know when a talent is delivering value or when they're delivering value or when they're not. Do they need to understand the technicalities? But they don't need to be the smartest person in the room. How do we actually even groom talent developers? Talent developers part of core leadership. As part of core leadership. You promote them from that, we are a leader, the moment we are a leader to the people that we are managing, their people that we are managing, their future. It's their livelihoods, and you're making that a core part of leadership.
And it's so important. If I come back to where we first started, business cases and business plans, what does that mean, Jasmine? What does that mean? The business cases we put together for recruitment, we put together for recruitment and for development.
So the business cases, if I look at recruitment, development is when I think of development is when I think of promote people on the right. Let's promote people on the right and leadership skills, not because they are. Let's get away from encouraging and rewarding the white horse who comes and saves the day. And as leaders question, why is it that you were the one person who has to come and save the day? Is it because you did not develop you? Is it because you did not bring people in? I think that culture. And then I look at development from that perspective. The next perspective. The next really honing in and saying, look, yes, let's assume a traditional 40-hour work, but let's make it our responsibility and obligation that is part of our time is invested, and it's our job. And it's our job on developing leadership skills and making it real separately, and then holding leaders accountable to deliver against those leadership skills. So I think on one end, we have to create the capacity, we have to make it a priority, but on the other end, we have to hold them to account. And both of them require investment. And
if I come back to the spreadsheets, I like the idea of spreadsheets. I like the idea of budget to investment, giving a certain amount of budget to investment. Quantify that. How do you quantify that?
Quantify
the budget. How do we make it the budget? How do we make it into figures?
Well, I think you can, right? So, like, if we get laser focused on, let's take leadership development, let's take leadership development, right? In the business, and we're going to invest in building a skill-based organization. And let's say I'll pick one storytelling. Like I'm just gonna. Okay, so what does that mean? So that means what does that mean? That means in a business case, the way I quantify that is one, assessing my talent on a periodic basis against number one skill. Number two, also quantify and identifying the number of instances that capability is getting actively utilized to drive a different outcome, and taking credit for it. And because it if you start practicing those muscles, the outcomes then become result, a natural and result, very ruthless, and measuring that as much as it might not be a traditional X basis points off of my cost of production, basis points for my cost of goods sold. Yes, it's not that binary. Yes, it's not that binary. Turn it into that, and then what I love at the end of the day is actually then going back and saying, okay, let's look at how do I now make it even more finance? How do I now make it even more finance? If I am managing a portfolio 10 clients across 20 business 20 clients across 5 business units. Where am I seeing those 10 clients? Have I increased business portfolio across those 10? And measuring that. Have I also expanded the scope of services where now these 10 clients are getting serviced by all 5 of my business units, right? Flexing both horizontally and vertically to see the uplift, because these outcomes will become relevant.
So I'm almost hearing a different model. I'm thinking visually as you're sketching it out. Visually as you're sketching it out. What does AI bring to that? What does AI bring to that?
AI brings to it speed. Being able to do it at speed. One, it's at speed. Two, it also means that how we get there, the cycle time is faster. You can have more generalists on your team. So if you think about the world of AI that I'll use programming, software programming. And I go back to my conversation, my comment earlier. The genesis of why you needed a very department, because that is where you housed all of your programmers. It's a very specialized skill. Highly sought after, and specialized skill, and because it's such a specialized skill, it needs to only sit in that domain. What is AI really doing? What AI is saying that you don't need a software programmer anymore. You don't need a software programmer. What you need is someone. A PhD in data science. But do you need people who understand? How data models work as a generalist? So that means that now technology is no longer a dedicated vertical that is very highly specialized. But if I'm finance, since we're talking about finance here, I'm more empowered to build those models. I understand and have a certain level of digital literacy. So I can then get there faster, and I can build their models, and I can deliver the outcomes that we are looking for as a finance community.
So digital literacy, digital literacy and AI literacy is going to be leadership skill that everybody needs to have. Whatever generation is. And if I fast forward us 4 or 5 years, what 4 or 5 years would a finance function look like? Would a finance function look like got this transition right? That got this transition. Can you sort of visualize it for us?
So 5 years from now,
we don't know.
I think the structure is going to be much more fluid, right? I think successful finance functions are going to have more diverse capabilities sitting in the function. High performing. They're not going to be traditional talent with it's not going to be exclusive to that. It's not going to be exclusive to that. I think that's going to be a big change. I also think the demographics it's not going to be just human talent. It's going to be digital human talent. It's going to be digital talent. It's going to be a combination of those two. My counsel to I'm an adjunct at my counsel to the up and coming talent tomorrow is how do we help them build so that as they enter the workforce, they're coming from a point of resilience. And strength. 5 years from now, the world will continue to move. While the world will continue to move, because as organizations, we're always look to create more value. But for that up and coming talent, how do they lean into that disruption? And elevate themselves? And elevate themselves. I think they need to start elevating themselves today and get elevating themselves today and get in front of the change and the disruption.
And if that would that be your final call to action? If I were to ask you the final call to action around staying relevant, around staying relevant, what would that in finance? What would that be?
What that would be is to say my final call to action. Young talent. Folks who are already within the organization, as a function, an individual, as an organization. AI is here to stay. It's going to change, and it's changing, and it's going to change, and it's changing. So in order to remain relevant, we need to continuously reimagine how we create value, beyond the surface layer, how we create value for tomorrow. Is not obvious, but how we get there. But how we get there, investing in ourselves, investing in ourselves, in our organizations, lead from the front and not.
Thank you. I'm going to leave our listeners with. Thank you. I'm going to leave our listeners in themselves and their teams in the organisation, but also recruiting for adaptability. But also recruiting for adaptability, not just credentials. From this discussion, not just credentials. This whole piece around. If you're a leader, you develop your talent. You have to develop your talent, not just technologically, but also and more important side of organisations, which are essentially living organisations, aren't they? Because they are made from the people within them. Made from the people within them. Yeah, I'm also taking away. Transformation isn't a system upgrade. Transformation isn't a system upgrade. So that's my biggest takeaway. That's my biggest takeaway for today's listeners, and I'm also going to leave our listeners with that. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience. Where can people find out more about you, Jasmine? And what you do?
So the easiest way to get a hold of me is I'm on LinkedIn. Jasmine Ahmed. Easily reach out to me by email. I absolutely am passionate about the people element. So I'm very much passionate about it. They can reach out to me. As I truly believe, and I want to the legacy I want to leave behind, and helping every person become a better version of themselves every day they wake up. They can reach out to me, and I'd be more than happy to help them with.
I'll put all those notes. All those links in the show notes. All those links in the show notes. Your quest is very clear. Your quest I'm not going to say anything else about that. I'm not going to say anything else about that. Thanks once again, Jasmine. Thanks for a great conversation. Thanks once again, Jasmine. Thanks for a great conversation.
Thank you, Susie.